Ladies and gentlemen, we're back at America Fest 2022. Frank Turek is in the house. Frank Turek is one of those people I go to for apologetics. We got to have a response and a defense for our faith. You're going to schools, you're going to conferences. I want to talk about apologetics for dummies, because not everybody can be Frank Turek.
Hopefully not. Well, one of me is enough. You kidding?
You want to hire this guy. Don't go to me for the apologetics. But how do people defend the faith when they don't have maybe the marketing prowess that you have or the research background that you have? How do you expect people to defend the faith right now?
Well, I think a lot of times they can just ask questions of other people. Like, why do you believe what you believe? When somebody says something, it's not your job to refute what they say. It's their job to support what they say. So like you're talking to them and you go, yeah, I'm a Christian. And they go, I can't believe the Bible. It's been changed throughout the centuries. You don't want to go into a dissertation as to why they're wrong. You want to ask them for evidence as to why they are right. So you might want to say, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean it's been changed throughout the centuries? And see what they say. If they give you this explanation like it's a telephone game, like that's the way we got the Bible, that's not the way we got the Bible. Then you can say, well, how did you come to that conclusion? In other words, what evidence do you have for that position? Because I can guarantee you, John, most of the people who are not Christians, and this might even be true of some Christians actually, but most of the people out there, they don't have a coherent worldview that they've thought through and they think it's true. What they've heard are slogans that they like, and they don't even know if the slogans are true. And some of these slogans are mutually contradictory that they believe all at the same time. So you just need to challenge the slogan. The Bible's been changed throughout the centuries. What evidence do you have for that? Have you investigated the manuscript evidence for yourself? I guarantee you nobody's ever going to say, yeah, just last night I was up reading a book about the Byzantine line of manuscripts. They're not going to say that. Yeah. So before somebody is going to accept your worldview, you've got to get them to doubt their worldview. So you ask questions. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? And is it hard to ask questions? No, it's easy. It's hard to answer them. Yeah. So you ask enough questions to get them to start to have questions in their own mind. Maybe what I believe isn't really true. Then you can provide some evidence for Christianity.
Why are people constantly on the defensive? Because it seems like, especially like if we're just talking cultural, political issues, there's people out here that's like, Frank, you're hateful, you're bigoted.
Okay, stop right there, stop right there. If somebody says that, you say, what do you mean by hate?
Yep.
What do you mean by bigoted? Because as soon as they try and define it, they're going to be in trouble. Mm-hmm. If they say, well, you don't agree with me, or you don't agree with this group, well, you don't agree with me, does that make you hateful? Yeah. Right? Oh, you're a bigot, what does that mean? Well, you don't agree with me or this group or this. Well, you don't agree with me, are you a bigot toward me? Yeah. I mean, the language is completely contrived to shut you up. So simply ask for a definition of what they mean. What do you mean by bigotry? In fact, one time I've written a book called Correct, Not Politically Correct, How Same-Sex Marriage Hurts Everyone. And a same-sex marriage advocate called me a bigot. And I said, what do you mean by bigotry? And he said, fear and intolerance. I said, that's not the definition of bigotry. The definition of bigotry is having a firm opinion on something without having done any research. You're prejudiced against a particular position or for a particular position. And I said, sir, if anyone is a bigot here, with all due respect, it's not me, it's you, because I hold this position. I've written an entire book on it, and you don't know why I hold the position. You're prejudging my position without knowing why I hold it. So you're the one that's actually engaged in bigotry, not me. So always ask questions. As soon as they call you a name, say, what do you mean by that? Define it.
Why do you feel like people are constantly responding of like, no, I'm not. I'm not hateful. It's like, why do you think people buy into that? They're just not prepared? Or they don't understand conflict?
Yeah, they probably haven't thought to simply ask the question, what do you mean by that? What is the definition of hate in your mind? If hate means disagreement, then you hate me because you disagree with me. Can I call you a hater now? They're going to say no, of course not. This is the problem. Satan comes as an angel of light. Satan is always going to try and diffuse, or he's always going to try and obscure the truth, or shut the truth down, or sell a lie with great sounding words like equality and equity and choice and reproductive freedom, right? These are all nice sounding words that nobody should be against.
Packaged very, very well.
It's packaged to sell a lie. That's what Satan does. He's a liar and a murderer, so he's going to sell evil by sugarcoating it with good. And he's going to degrade people who are out there trying to put forth the good by having other people call those people names. You're a hater, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe, whatever it is. They're just going to call you names to shut you up. Well, that's just an ad hominem fallacy in logic. To call a person a name does not refute the argument. I might be all those things. That doesn't mean what I'm saying is false.
Yeah. What are the questions you're getting all the time? Because I know you'll have people that either agree with you, they call themselves a Christian, or you have people on the opposite side. What are some of the maybe 2-3 questions you're constantly getting when you're doing apologetics, whether it's on a campus, college campus, or any other place?
A lot of the questions are dealing with morality, John. Like questions like, why did God kill the Canaanites? Why is there evil in the world? What about the LGBTQ issue? Does the Bible disagree with gay rights? Those kinds of questions. They're all moral questions because that's where young people live today. They're living in morality. Look, there's great evidence for God, evidence from the beginning of the universe, evidence from design of the universe, evidence from the design of life, evidence from the moral law written on the heart. But the moral law written on the heart is probably the best evidence for today's culture because they can ignore the beginning, they can ignore design, they can't argue morality. They're arguing morality all the time, right? They're saying they got a right to this, they got a right to that. We're inventing rights every 10 minutes in our country. What is this? They don't seem to realize rights only exist if God exists. Otherwise, it's just my opinion against yours, or your opinion against Hitler's opinion if there's no standard beyond humanity. So many of the people claiming they have rights to X, Y, or Z, particularly in the sexual issues, many of them are atheists. They don't seem to realize that if God does not exist, there are no rights to anything. There's not only no right to same-sex marriage, there's no right to natural marriage. There's not only no right to abortion, there's no right to life if there's no God. Nothing is a right, everything is a preference if there's no God.
How much do you feel like the whole perpetuating of your truth has ruined the Christian church? Because there's a lot of people that say like, well, you know, my experience or my truth, Frank. It's like, you got to get on my level here.
Right.
If I feel like you're hateful or bigoted, or I feel like I'm reading this passage and I feel this way, how do you feel like your truth, my truth is ruined?
Well, if you're ever in a Bible study and somebody says, hey, John, what does this verse mean to you? You ought to say, it doesn't matter what it means to me. It matters what it meant to Paul or Moses or whoever wrote it down. Because this is God's word. We don't want to put our word into it. We want to extract what he meant by it. And for us to just have all these feelings about a particular passage doesn't mean that we're interpreting it rightly. I mean, if you write a friend a text and you say, hey, meet me at Starbucks at 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. and that's pretty clear, right? Meet me at Starbucks at 9 a.m. And he interprets it as, meet me at Jack in the Box at noon because he just felt that way. You'd go, you're crazy, man. You know what I meant by that. It's not what you feel about what the message I gave you. The meaning is in the message I sent you, not what you think about it.
How have people fallen into this? Because I know I've spoken about that thing specifically too. The way I see it, like within itself, not a bad question, but if that's where you start, that's a problem.
What's not a bad question?
Not a bad question. You're saying, what did you get out of that?
Oh, what did you get out of it? Okay.
If you're starting just at that.
Well, you see, that's the difference between what does the verse mean and how is the truth from the verse applied. What did you get out of it means how is it applied? But you have to know what it means before you can apply it. You see, this is why, and some of you are going to hate me for this, but this is why Jeremiah 29:11 does not apply to us today. You know, Jeremiah 29:11, which says, oh, the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, plans to give you a hope. What's the context of that? That passage was not written to 21st century Christians. That passage was written to people who lived 2,600 years ago in Babylon. It was written to the exiles who were taken to Babylon in 586 BC. God was telling them that 70 years from that point, he would prosper them. He would have a future for them. It's not a promise to us, it was a promise to them. Yet we take it out of context and try and make it apply to us. I always ask people who try and apply Jeremiah 29:11 to them, I'd say, why don't you quote Jeremiah 44:11 and apply it to you? Why? Because what's in Jeremiah 44:11? Jeremiah 44:11 is what God told he would do to the exiles who went to Egypt. He told them not to go to Egypt. So here's what Jeremiah 44:11 says. It says, I will destroy you and all Judah. You don't see that stitched into a pillow.
No.
You don't see that on a birthday card.
That's not tattooed on anybody's arm.
Jeremiah 44:11, I will destroy
I love
you.
this verse.
Yeah, that's right. We've got to understand the Bible in context. We've got to not just take a verse out of context. We've got to read around it and figure out what it meant.
Final question. Why are we so egotistical then? Why are we reading the Bible and saying like, I am David and this is my Goliath? Or you have preachers in the South that are propping people up, like now Senator-elect Raphael Warnock, he's a David, finds some sort of Goliath of the right. He's a Nehemiah that's building something incredible. He's a Moses leading people to the promised land. How do you get preachers and even individuals not to look at the Bible and conflate it into some sort of politically driven idea from the left, or make that all about them?
Yeah, well, that's a big problem. I think you just got to ask them, why do you think that Raphael Warnock, or whoever you're talking about, that new senator there down in Georgia, why do you think he is is he a David or a Goliath? Is that what the passage is teaching, by the way? The passage is not teaching that God can slay the giants in your life. That's not the passage, yet many pastors will do that, right? They try and take every event in the Old Testament, a descriptive event, and make it a prescriptive event to us today. It's not, okay? And so anybody who's trying to say this passage applies to Warnock or anybody else is not understanding the text properly, okay? Those texts were about a historical event that may have some life lessons in it for us, but it was about an historical event that David trusted God. He's in the line of the Messiah, and he trusted God, and he slayed the giant. That's an historical event, but it's not a prescription for us today. It's just, this is what happened to David. Here's what he did, and he had faith, and look what happened.
I know I said that was a final question. I got a bonus one off of that. So when people are looking at people like David, obviously David's one of those characters that we can struggle with quite a bit, but we know that Jesus came from the line of David. David was not a perfect person at all, but like, how do we look at these biblical characters and emulate aspects of them, but realizing that these stories were pointing to Jesus, not to us, or trying to elevate this individual as someone to emulate more than Jesus Christ?
You go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, because in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul says that these stories, which really happened, were written down as examples to us. Now, many of them are negative examples. How do we know that? Because the next section of scripture is a famous passage that many people memorize. It goes like this: no temptation has seized you except what is common to man. What was common to man? All of the sins and the temptations and the sins that the people in the Old Testament fell into. And so it's basically saying that, yeah, David did some good things, but he also fell into sin because of these temptations. So what Paul is saying is that there's no temptation that you are going to experience that's different than what David or anybody else experienced in the Old Testament. God will always provide you a way out so you can stand up under it. So Paul is saying, read those Old Testament scriptures. They really happened. Those events really happened. And the lessons you ought to take from them is don't do what they did when they fell. That's what he's saying.
Tell people where they can follow you.
Crossexamine.org, 2 words. No, it's actually 1 word, crossexamine.org. The YouTube channel is 2 words, Cross-Examine. But if they go to our website, it's linked to everything. We have a podcast called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. We have a TV show by the same name. You can find it all at crossexamine.org.
Frank, thanks so much.
Thank you, John. It's great being here.